This video is on how to add and subtract fractions. I'm going to start with this one right here on the left, and it's the exact same process except one you subtract and one you add, depending on what your signs are like. Here, the first thing I have to do is I have to first make this into a mixed number. Now, when I add or subtract fractions, I like to stack them top and bottom because we will be changing these numbers to make equivalent fractions. So I have negative 8/10 minus 1 3/5. Well, I have to make that improper, so I multiply. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 3 is 8 over 5. Now the next step is I have to make equivalent fractions because these don't have the same denominator. The easiest strategy number 1, is to see if the smaller denominator goes evenly into the bigger denominator. In this case, 5 does go evenly into 10, which makes 10 the common denominator. Now this is already over 10, so I'm just going to rewrite the same thing, making sure, notice how I took the negative sign with me. Now I have to make this out of 10. Well, I can't just say, well, I didn't like the denominator 5, so I'm going to change it to 10. What you can do is make an equivalent fraction. It's kind of the opposite of simplifying. Instead of dividing both numbers by the same thing, I multiply both of them. So you ask yourself, 5 times what equals 10? Well, that would be 5 times 2. So then you do the same thing to the number here. 5 times 2 is 10, 8 times 2 is 16, and I'm going to bring the minus sign over. Well, because we have subtraction, we have to do adding the opposite. So I'm going to change this to adding the opposite. Then I like to circle the numerators and the signs and operations. That way, to make sure I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I have a negative 8 plus a negative 16. So I'm going to just kind of write that over here. Negative 8 plus negative 16. Those have the same sign, so it actually just add them and keep the sign the same. And 16 plus 8 is 24. I'm going to keep the sign negative, so I have negative 24 over 10. And then that, of course, is actually improper, so I'm going to make it back into a mixed number. And to do so, I'm just going to divide them, top number in, bottom number out. 10 goes into 2 0 times, and it goes into 24 2 times. That 2 is a whole number, and that's 20, and I get a remainder of 4. My remainder goes here in the numerator, and the 10 stays the same. Except that can still be simplified right there, so I actually end up with negative 2. I divide both of these by 2, and I get 2/5. So I get negative 2 and 2/5. Okay, now this over here, we kind of solve the same way, except sometimes we can't find the denominator quite as easily. Again, they don't have the same denominator, so first I'm going to just start by writing them both this way. And 6 does not go evenly into 8, so I can't use that strategy. Now, strategy number 2, you can always multiply them. I could multiply them and get 6 times 8 is 48. However, that's kind of a big denominator. You can use it. You'll still get the same answer. However, it's just going to be a lot more simplifying involved. So 48 will be too large, too hard to simplify. Another thing I can do is I can make a list of multiples by making a little T-chart. Now something, I'm just going to make it up here. Let's switch colors here. So the way that I like to do it is I like to go by the larger number first. So I have my two denominators, 6 and 8. I like to go by the larger one first and kind of just check as I go along, is that a multiple of the other number? Now multiple means you're like skip counting, so we're counting by 6s and counting by 8s. So first I would go 8. Okay, well 8 is not a multiple of 6. Next is 16. Okay, I can't get to 16 by counting by 6s. Next would be 24. Oh, I can get to 24 by counting by 6s. If I just did this up here, I would say 6, 12, 18, and then 24. Sorry, don't know what happened to my screen there. But like we said, the common denominator would be 24. Sorry, my screen keeps moving. So now that we know our common denominator is going to be 24, we're going to make equivalent fractions, making these both out of 24. Again, you can't just say I don't like 6 and 8 and change them to 24. So what would I do to get 6 into to make 6 24? I would multiply this by 4. So I'm going to do the same here. So I get negative 16. Over here, I would multiply 8 times 3 to get 24. So I would multiply 6 times 3 and get 18. I'm going to bring my plus sign over. And now I'm going to circle my numerators and operations. So I have negative 16 plus 18. In this case, this is where we're actually going to subtract because they have different signs. 18 minus 16 is 2. And there are more positives here than there are negatives. This 18 has a bigger absolute value, so our answer would be 2 over 24. And then I have to simplify. I can divide these both by 2. And I get 1 over 12, which cannot be simplified.